Under the unrelenting blaze of a Texas afternoon, the Jasper Creek livestock auction pulsed with the kind of energy only found when money, pride, and a bit of desperation mixed together in the summer heat.
Bad shape.
Sunlight pounded down on the tin roof, making the whole place shimmer like a mirage. Inside, men and women in sweat-stained hats clustered around makeshift
Grandma,
fences,
what are you doing out here?
hollering
Is that a
over the
horse?
lowing of cattle,
He's Jesse
the
Ray.
restless shifting of horses,
He needs us.
and the auctioneer's sharp, practiced call.
It's a nasty infection, Evelyn.
At the edge of it
You need to
all,
act fast.
a woman stood
What can
with
we
a
do,
posture
Doctor?
both humble
be okay?
and unbreakable.
If he makes it through the night,
Evelyn
it'll be a
Carter,
miracle.
white, 68 years old, a widow for nearly a decade now, gripped the handle of her battered purse like it was the last thing she owned. In many ways, it was. Her hands, strong but marked with years of hard labor, trembled only slightly as she wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, then fixed her blue-gray eyes on the ring. The men closest to her kept their distance, not out of respect, but the way people do when they think someone's luck might be contagious in the worst way. The next animal up was barely more than a shadow of what a horse should be. Gray, limping, head low, patches of hair missing. His ribs stood out beneath a mottled hide. The auctioneer's voice changed, softening in mock sympathy. Now, what we got here is a special case, folks. Any takers for this fine, almost four-legged fella? Last chance before the rendering truck backs in? Someone laughed. Loud, mocking, cruel. A cluster of teenage boys near the gate whistled and hooted. A woman in a pearl snap shirt shook her head, said something under her breath about old fools and lost causes. Evelyn pressed forward, her heart pounding. She saw something in the colt's eyes. Fear, yes, but also a wild, defiant spark. She remembered her late husband, Tom, always saying, "Don't you ever give up on something that's still got fight left in it." The bidding started at $10, no hands. The auctioneer tried $5. Still, nothing but jeers and a cough or two. Evelyn's voice, thin but steady, cut through the heat. $2. Silence. Then a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Someone called out, "Lady, you're better off buying a bag of flour?" The auctioneer's grin widened. Sold to the brave lady in the back. $2. I hope you got a plot picked out, ma'am, 'cause you just paid for a funeral, not a miracle. As the gavel struck, Evelyn felt every eye on her. Pity, amusement, disbelief. She didn't look at them. Instead, she walked toward the colt, her boots stirring up dust. The animal tried to shy away, leg trembling, but she moved slow, humming under her breath. He let her touch his muzzle. "I'm calling you Jesse Ray," she whispered. "We're both too stubborn for our own good." The walk home was long, even though her farm lay just a mile outside Jasper Creek. Every step, Jesse Ray faltered, sometimes refusing to move at all, so she'd stand beside him, speaking softly, letting him catch his breath. The road was empty except for the distant sound of a pickup roaring by. A pair of teenagers driving past in a rusty Ford slowed down to gawk. One of them hollered something Evelyn chose not to hear. When they finally reached the small Carter farm, really just a sagging white house, a half-collapsed barn, and 3 acres of burnt grass, Evelyn paused at the gate. She let Jesse Ray look around, scent the air. Chickens scattered from the path. Her only neighbor, old Mr. Grady, watched from his porch, squinting, not bothering to hide his smirk. "Lose a bet, Evelyn?" he called. She didn't answer, leading Jesse Ray to the shade of an oak. He stood there, sides heaving, while Evelyn fetched a bucket of water and an old wool blanket. She talked as she worked, telling Jesse Ray stories about her Tom, about years of drought, about the time she'd once saved a stray dog from the creek. The rhythm of her voice seemed to steady the colt, even as his leg quivered and sweat trickled down his bony neck. Night fell slow and heavy, bringing the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes. Evelyn sat beside Jessie Ray, knees aching, but her spirit stubborn as ever. She counted her last few coins, enough for a little feed, maybe a roll of bandage. Tomorrow she'd figure out more. Tonight, she wrapped his leg as best she could, hands gentle, words softer than the sighing wind. In the darkness, alone except for the broken colt, Evelyn Carter made a silent promise. She'd seen too much loss to quit now, not when something or someone needed her. Back at the auction house, the jokes and laughter had already faded, replaced by talk of cattle prices and tomorrow's storms. But on the edge of Jasper Creek, a battered gray colt rested under the careful watch of a woman who knew that sometimes the smallest act of hope could defy the whole world's expectations. And as the moon rose, Jessie Ray leaned into her hand. Just a little. Evelyn smiled, tired but undefeated. We'll show 'em, you and me. Let's see what a miracle looks like. The first rays of dawn crept over Evelyn Carter's farm, painting the world in pale gold and rose. But there was no beauty in her heart that morning. Only worry. She'd slept in a rickety lawn chair beside Jessie Ray's makeshift stall, every bone in her body aching, but her eyes wouldn't let her rest. The colt lay stretched out on a threadbare blanket, his legs swollen, his breaths shallow and ragged. Evelyn took a moment to press her hands together, just breathing in the silence. The auctioneer's words echoed in her memory. You just paid for a funeral, not a miracle. Well, maybe so. But she was never one to back down from a fight, especially when there was a spark of life left. She set to work, boiling water on the rusty propane stove in her kitchen, her movements practiced but tense. Each trip back to the barn was a journey, out the door, across the dew-soaked yard, a mug of chamomile tea in one hand, an old tin box of supplies in the other. She'd nursed sick animals before, but never something so fragile, so close to slipping away. Jessie Ray's eyes followed her with a dull, haunted look. She spoke in a low, steady voice, cleaning his wounds with warm water, her fingers gentle but sure. She sprinkled salt in the water. No antiseptic, no painkillers, just the sting of necessity. The colt jerked, a shudder passing through his thin body. It's all right, Jessie Ray, she murmured. I know it hurts. You're not alone. She coaxed him to drink a little, the sweet smell of molasses masking the bitterness of medicine she'd ground from the last pills in her cupboard. When he refused, she dipped a rag and squeezed drops into his mouth, patient as a stone. All morning she worked, changing the bandage, cleaning, whispering words of comfort, her hands never still. Outside, the sun climbed, bringing the noise of the town to life. Somewhere far off, church bells rang. Closer, voices drifted over the fence. Nosy neighbors, their whispers as sharp as barbed wire. That old Carter woman's lost her mind. Should have let that horse go. Just like her, hanging on to things that ought to be gone. Evelyn heard them. She always did. She just kept moving, jaw set, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. By afternoon, Jessie Ray's fever spiked. His breathing grew ragged, and a dark terror crept into Evelyn's heart. She sat down in the straw, wiped her forehead with a shaking hand, and stared at the small pile of coins on the feed barrel. That was all she had left. Enough for a loaf of bread, maybe a little oats. Not nearly enough for a vet. She closed her eyes, feeling the old ache of loneliness swell inside her. Tom was gone. The kids scattered across the country. Most days she couldn't even get them to call. It had just been her, the farm, and the memories for years now. But something in the colt's suffering made her feel less alone, not more. They were both castaways, fighting for another chance. She sang an old country lullaby, soft, broken at the edges, but full of hope. The song her mother had sung to her in the dark days after her father died. Her voice seemed to settle Jesse Ray, his shaking easing for a moment. As the sun slipped behind the trees, a decision rose in her chest. Sharp, impossible to ignore. She wouldn't let this animal die, not without doing everything in her power. She reached for the phone, hands trembling, and dialed Dr. Nash, the only veterinarian in town who'd ever shown her any kindness. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. She tried again, and this time, Dr. Nash picked up, sounding tired. "Evelyn, you all right?" "Doc, I got a colt. Bad shape. I ain't got much, but if you come out, I'll pay what I can, I swear." There was a long pause on the line. She imagined him staring at the clock, weighing her words. "I'll be there in an hour, Evelyn." She hung up, relief and dread colliding in her chest. She sat down, feeling the full weight of what she'd done. That was all her money, and maybe more, but she didn't care. Not now. Dusk crept in, soft and purple. As Evelyn waited, a figure appeared at the gate. A woman, young, carrying a battered duffel bag. For a split second, Evelyn thought her eyes were playing tricks. But as the figure drew closer, she recognized the sharp chin, the stormy eyes, the flash of red hair. Ruby. Her granddaughter, back after 5 years away. No call, no warning, just there. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "Grandma, what are you doing out here? Is that a horse?" Ruby's voice held a blend of shock and disbelief. "Not just any horse," Evelyn replied, trying to steady herself. "He's Jesse Ray, and he needs us." Ruby stared at the colt, her city clothes at odds with the dirt and straw. She shook her head, a strange smile flickering on her lips. "You're still saving lost causes, huh?" Evelyn almost laughed, but her eyes burned with unshed tears. Someone has to. Just then, Dr. Nash's truck rattled up the drive. He hurried inside, taking charge, checking Jesse Ray's temperature, peering at his leg, murmuring to himself. He shot Evelyn a look, not unkind, but full of worry. "It's bad. Infection's deep. He's got a fever. If he makes it through the night, it'll be a miracle." He gave Jesse Ray a shot, left her with more medicine and a heavy heart, and drove off as darkness wrapped around the old farm. Evelyn and Ruby stayed up, watching the colt breathe, listening to the sounds of the night, wind in the trees, the distant bark of a dog, the low, steady pulse of hope. "You always fight for the underdog, Grandma," Ruby said, her voice soft. Evelyn smiled, squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "Someone's got to believe when nobody else will." As the clock crept past midnight, Jesse Ray's chest finally rose a little easier. For the first time, Evelyn let herself hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd get their miracle after all. Morning broke gently over the Carter farm, the air carrying the scent of dew and the first hopeful notes of birdsong. Evelyn woke stiff and sore, her head resting against a hay bale, fingers still curled protectively around Jesse Ray's makeshift stall. For a heart-stopping moment, she couldn't hear anything, not even the sound of breathing. Panic jolted her awake. Then she heard it. The faint, steady huff of the colt's breath, softer but clearer than it had been in days. Jessie Ray was still alive. Evelyn let out a long sigh, brushing straw from her hair, and looked around the barn. Ruby was there too, bundled in an old quilt, auburn hair fanned across her face. Sometime during the night, she'd pulled up a rickety chair next to her grandmother, refusing to leave her side. Evelyn smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest that had nothing to do with the rising sun. Jessie Ray lifted his head, blinking at the morning light. His legs still trembled, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in his dark eyes, something new and bright. Evelyn dipped her fingers into a bucket of water, holding it close until the colt nosed forward and drank, each swallow a small victory. "He made it through," Evelyn whispered. Ruby stirred, eyes heavy with sleep but sharp as ever. She watched the way her grandmother stroked the colt's mane, slow and patient. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" Ruby asked. "Neither did you," Evelyn replied, a hint of pride coloring her voice. Ruby shrugged, glancing away. The city had taught her a lot, but it hadn't made her any less stubborn than the woman who raised her. They spent the next few days in a rhythm that felt almost like healing. Evelyn showed Ruby how to mix up the oats and mash the medicine, how to change Jessie Ray's bandages without startling him. Ruby, always impatient as a girl, found her hands growing steadier, her touch gentler as she braided the colt's ragged mane and whispered secrets she never meant to share. Sometimes they worked in silence, the only sounds the soft nickers of Jessie Ray, the rustle of chickens, and the wind moving through the old pecan trees. Other times, Evelyn told stories about her late husband Tom and his wild ideas, about floods and droughts, about the time she'd ridden all night to rescue a neighbor's cow caught in a barbed wire fence. "He believed in fixing what was broken," Evelyn said, voice soft, "even if everyone else said it was impossible." Ruby listened, caught between skepticism and longing. She remembered her childhood summers, running wild on this very land, skin sunburnt and knees scraped. She'd run away to the city for a reason, to escape the endless work, the feeling of being trapped. But now, as she brushed the dust from Jessie Ray's coat, she realized she missed those days more than she'd ever let on. By midweek, Jessie Ray was standing longer, putting a little more weight on his injured leg. His coat, though still patchy, glimmered silver in the sunlight. Evelyn watched him with a quiet pride that bordered on awe. One afternoon, after Ruby had finished mucking out the stalls, she leaned against the fence and wiped her brow, smearing a streak of mud across her cheek. "You know, for a city girl, I'm getting pretty handy with a pitchfork," Ruby teased. Evelyn chuckled, eyes crinkling at the corners. "You always were. You just forgot." They watched Jessie Ray together, the silence between them now companionable, heavy with understanding. Ruby glanced at her grandmother, voice suddenly uncertain. "Grandma, why'd you do it? Why risk everything for a horse nobody wanted?" Evelyn was quiet a long moment, her gaze distant. "I guess I saw myself in him. People gave up on me after Tom died, figured I was finished, too old, too stubborn for my own good." Ruby looked down, shame flickering across her features. She'd been one of those people, hadn't she? Quick to judge, quicker to leave. "I was wrong," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Evelyn squeezed her hand, rough palms warm. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." That evening, as the sun dipped low, they worked together in the garden, the earth cool and dark beneath their fingers. Ruby dug up onions, her laughter echoing across the field as a rabbit darted past, chased by a half-blind barn cat. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron, feeling years of grief loosen their hold on her heart. They sat on the porch swing as twilight settled, watching the stars blink to life, Jessie Ray grazing quietly in the paddock. Evelyn picked up her old guitar, the one Tom had given her for their anniversary, and strummed a soft tune. Ruby sang along, her voice shy at first, then growing stronger. By the time the moon rose, it felt like something had shifted between them, a new understanding, fragile as the colt, but real all the same. The farm was still poor, the future still uncertain, but for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel quite so alone. Jessie Ray nickered softly, approaching the fence where Ruby stood. She reached out, letting him nuzzle her hand. In that moment, with the cool night air and the sound of music fading, she realized that sometimes hope didn't look like a miracle. Sometimes it looked like a battered gray colt, a patched-up family, and a second chance you never saw coming. "We're gonna be all right," Evelyn said, and for the first time, Ruby believed her. Dawn on the Carter farm was a quiet, sacred thing. Mist floated in silver ribbons across the fields, and dew clung to every blade of grass like pearls. Ruby pulled on her boots and stepped outside, pausing to soak in the peace before the day began. She spotted Jessie Ray trotting, stronger now, his limp barely noticeable in the golden light. Every morning brought a little more strength to his legs, a little more shine to his coat. Evelyn had started calling him Miracle Boy, and no one argued. After chores, Ruby leaned against the paddock fence, lost in thought. She was brushing dirt from under her nails when a voice called out from the road. "Well, is that Carter's new colt?" It was Hank Roscoe, the neighbor from a few properties down. Hank was a fixture in Jasper Creek, a man who'd seen every horse that came through the auction for the last 40 years. He strolled over, hat tipped back, eyes fixed on Jessie Ray with an intensity that made Ruby uneasy. Evelyn came out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mornin', Hank." "Mornin', Evelyn. That's a fine-looking animal you got there. Mind if I take a closer look?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. Hank climbed the fence with a practiced ease and approached Jessie Ray, moving slow and deliberate. He circled the colt, eyes narrowed, then stopped at Jessie Ray's left shoulder. "Well, I'll be damned." Ruby and Evelyn exchanged a look. "What is it?" Ruby asked, her voice cautious. Hank pointed at a patch of gray hair just above the colt's knee. In the center, a distinct white swirl gleamed like a thumbprint. "That's the Claymore mark. Haven't seen one since I was a boy." Ruby frowned, not understanding. Hank whistled low. "Claymore horses are legends round here. Championship racers, everyone. Folks used to come from 3 counties just to see 'em run. If this colt's got that blood, he's worth more than all the cattle in Jasper Creek put together." The words settled over them like a cloud. Evelyn stared at Jessie Ray, her heart thudding. She'd bought him for $2, laughed at and pitied. Could it be possible? Hank shook his head, still marveling. How'd a Claymore end up at a rundown auction? Someone must not have known what they had. The idea took root in Ruby's mind and wouldn't let go. When Hank finally left, she hurried inside and dug through the pile of auction papers still sitting on the kitchen table. Bills of sale, registration slips, receipts, most of it useless. But she kept searching, determined. Her curiosity, once dulled by city life, now burned sharp as flint. she found a faded slip with a barely legible stamp. Claymore Stock, Jasper County. Her heart hammered. There was also a scrawled note, something about a dispersal sale, owner deceased. It didn't make sense, but it was enough to make her skin prickle. That night, as they sat around the kitchen table, Ruby spread the papers before Evelyn. The old woman's hands shook as she traced the Claymore name, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and dread. "If this gets out," Evelyn whispered. Ruby nodded. "The whole town will be at our door." They were right. Word traveled fast in Jasper Creek. By the next morning, folks were whispering at the feed store, at church, even outside the post office. "Did you hear about Carter's colt? They say he's Claymore, worth a fortune." With every rumor, the eyes on Evelyn's farm grew sharper, more calculating. Strangers slowed as they drove by. A woman from the next county knocked on the door, pretending to sell pies but really peering into the yard, searching for a glimpse of the miracle horse. Evelyn sent her away, her jaw set. Ruby sensed the tension building. She started locking the gates at night, checking windows twice before bed. Once, she caught a teenage boy lurking near the fence, cell phone raised. She shooed him off, heart pounding. It felt like the peace they'd found was slipping through their fingers. Even their few friends grew distant, torn between admiration and envy. At church, people came up to shake Evelyn's hand, but their words felt rehearsed. Pastor Allen asked if she'd considered donating Jessie Ray for the annual charity race. Evelyn smiled politely, but inside, a storm was gathering. One evening, after a long day of mending fences, Ruby found Evelyn in the barn, sitting beside Jessie Ray, humming a tune. The colt nuzzled her shoulder, as if sensing her unease. "You think we should have kept quiet?" Ruby asked. Evelyn shook her head. "Secrets never kept anyone safe. We'll stand our ground, like always." Ruby sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. "I just don't want to lose what we found. Us. This peace." Evelyn reached over, squeezing her granddaughter's hand. "Nothing good comes without a fight. We just have to remember why we started." As the sun set, painting the fields in orange and lavender, Ruby went back to her room and opened her laptop. She dug deeper, searching for anything about the Claymore bloodline, the dispersal sale, auction records. With every new piece of information, the picture grew clearer and more complicated. If Jessie Ray was truly a Claymore, he might not belong to them for long. Legal issues, old debts, greedy hands, it all felt like a storm on the horizon. But as Ruby watched her grandmother feed Jessie Ray, saw the way the colt pressed close, trusting and unafraid, she knew one thing. Whatever happened, they'd fight together. The whispers in town grew louder. Some people hoped to see Evelyn fail, others wanted to be part of her miracle. A few offered to buy Jessie Ray outright, waving checks under her nose. Evelyn refused every offer, her voice steady, her eyes never wavering. "He's family, not property." That night, as darkness settled over the Carter farm, Ruby lay awake, listening to the wind rattle the windows. She felt the weight of the secret pressing on her chest, but also a strange kind of hope. The truth was out, and whatever storm was coming, they would face it together, with stubbornness, love, and the unbreakable bond of family. The days that followed brought no peace. If anything, the air on the Carter farm seemed charged, as if a thunderstorm waited just beyond the blue horizon. Evelyn rose earlier than ever, her routine sharper, senses keener. Ruby found herself looking over her shoulder at every sound, every unfamiliar car on the county road, every neighbor's curious glance. On a hot afternoon, the kind when sweat clings to the skin before noon, Evelyn and Ruby were working in the yard, clearing away old fence posts and tangled wire. Jesse Ray grazed nearby, stronger and almost proud, his coat beginning to shimmer silver in the Texas sunlight. The peace of the moment shattered when the crunch of tires on gravel signaled the arrival of a visitor, one Evelyn had long hoped to avoid. A long, dark Cadillac rolled up the drive, dust billowing in its wake. The engine purred as it parked beside the house. Out stepped Wade Montgomery, tall, broad-shouldered, his black Stetson shadowing cold blue eyes. Wade wasn't just any rancher. He was the richest man in Jasper Creek, known for snapping up land and livestock with a smile as thin as a razor. Evelyn wiped her brow, glancing at Ruby. "Stay close," she murmured. Wade sauntered toward them, boots crunching in the dirt, his stride lazy and sure. "Afternoon, ladies," he drawled, removing his hat with a courtly nod. His eyes drifted to Jesse Ray, lingering. "Afternoon, Wade," Evelyn replied, her voice guarded. Wade wasted no time on small talk. "Word's out, you got yourself a real treasure. That colt of yours, he's got the Claymore mark, don't he?" Evelyn kept her back straight. "He's family." Wade smiled, lips tight. "Family's a fine thing, but money keeps the lights on. I'll make you an offer. 10,000 cash. Right here. Right now?" He pulled a checkbook from his pocket, flicking the corner with a practiced thumb. Ruby stiffened. The number was staggering. Enough to fix the roof, pay off the mortgage, maybe even more. Evelyn's jaw clenched. "He's not for sale, Wade." Wade's smile faded. "You sure? That horse could change your life. Or ruin it. Folks around here, they get jealous. Sometimes things happen." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "I know what happens when men like you want something they can't have." Wade slipped his hat back on, the shadows deepening. "Think it over. No need to rush, but don't make me ask twice." He turned and strode back to his car, glancing once at Ruby. "Nice to see you back in town, Miss Carter. Shame about the company you keep." The Cadillac disappeared down the drive, leaving a trail of tension behind. Evelyn's hands shook as she leaned on the fence. "He'll be back," she said, voice low. "Men like that don't take no for an answer." That evening, they double-checked every lock, every gate. Ruby slept lightly, her phone by her side, waiting for the next shoe to drop. The town felt smaller, more dangerous, as if Wade's shadow stretched across every field and alley. The next few days passed in a nervous blur. Wade sent his hired hands to the farm under the guise of checking the fencing. They drove by slow, watching, smirking, sometimes tossing empty beer cans in the ditch. One night, someone cut the fence on the north pasture. Jesse Ray wandered dangerously close to the road before Evelyn found him. Ruby fixed the fence with shaking hands, anger mixing with fear. The tension boiled over one moonless night. Ruby was in the barn, brushing Jesse Ray and humming, when she heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, too heavy to be a stray animal. Her heart thudded as she moved to the door, grabbing a pitchfork. The barn door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside. Face half hidden under a dirty ball cap. Ruby raised the pitchfork, voice trembling. "You have no right to be here." The man sneered, taking a step closer. "Easy, miss. No need for trouble. My boss just wants the horse. Hand him over and no one gets hurt." Ruby's grip tightened. "Get out. Now! The man lunged, grabbing at her arm. Ruby fought back, adrenaline surging. She swung the pitchfork, catching him in the shoulder. He cursed, shoving her against a stall. Jessie Ray reared, whinnying loud and wild, his hooves striking sparks from the stall floor. Evelyn burst in, wielding an old broom like a saber. "Get away from my granddaughter!" she shouted. The man, bleeding and startled by the commotion, stumbled back and fled into the darkness. Ruby slumped to the floor, shaking but unbroken. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her, whispering, "It's all right, baby. I'm here. We're all right." They checked Jessie Ray. His leg was bleeding, scraped by the stall. Nothing life-threatening, but the wound reopened old fears. Ruby dabbed ointment on his leg, her hands trembling. "He's never going to stop," she said. "Wade, he'll just keep coming." Evelyn set her jaw. "Then we'll keep fighting. We've come too far to give up now." By sunrise, word of the attack had spread. Some neighbors called to offer sympathy, others to gossip, a few to hint that maybe selling was the smart move. But Evelyn refused to be intimidated. The town itself began to fracture. Old friends took sides, some admiring the Carters' grit, others muttering that they were bringing trouble. The feed store became a battleground of whispers and sidelong glances. That night, Ruby sat on the porch steps, Jessie Ray's head in her lap. The colt's breath was warm and steady. Above them, the sky burned with stars, uncaring. "You know, I used to think coming home meant giving up," Ruby said softly. "But now I see. Sometimes home is where you make your stand." Evelyn joined her, placing a hand on Ruby's shoulder. "This is our land, our family. No one's taking that from us." They sat together in the darkness, a battered gray colt between them, facing the storm they knew was coming. But they were not alone. Not anymore. Summer deepened, and with it came a new, uneasy rhythm to the Carter farm. Evelyn and Ruby lived with one ear tuned to the wind, alert to every unfamiliar engine, every crunch of gravel. Even the animals seemed more restless. Hens clucking at odd hours, dogs barking at the slightest noise. In town, folks were either pointedly friendly or icy cold. At the feed store, conversation stopped when Evelyn walked in. Ruby noticed the way people's eyes slid past her, their greetings tight, full of warning or pity. But they pressed on. Evelyn kept her head high, fixing fences, checking locks, watching Jessie Ray heal day by day. Ruby's stubbornness only grew, her loyalty forged in fire. She put in long hours, helping her grandmother, tending Jessie Ray, and jotting down every odd occurrence in a battered notebook she kept in her pocket. They even laughed sometimes, making fun of Wade's blustery men or the parade of nosy townsfolk with their not-so-subtle questions. Still, beneath the small victories, the threat was ever present. One afternoon, Wade himself showed up again, his Cadillac gleaming, the sun glinting off its spotless chrome. He parked by the front gate, staying in the car this time, sunglasses reflecting the house. Evelyn didn't budge. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, a shotgun resting in the crook of her elbow, not pointed, but not exactly friendly either. Wade rolled down the window, voice casual but cold. "I'm done asking nicely, Evelyn. Sell me the colt. Before something happens you can't fix." Evelyn didn't answer. She just stared, and Wade finally drove away, tires kicking up a storm of dust behind him. That night, the heat clung to the world. No wind, just the heavy weight of summer pressing against the windows. Evelyn tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't rest. Ruby was restless too. wandering the house, checking doors, unable to shake the feeling that something was coming. Just after midnight, the world erupted. A shout split the night, then the unmistakable crackle of fire. Ruby bolted upright, heart in her throat. "Grandma, the barn!" Evelyn grabbed her boots and ran, her nightgown whipping around her legs. Outside, the sky glowed orange. Flames licked hungrily at the hay barn, sending plumes of black smoke into the night. The dry summer made the fire move fast, faster than fear. "Jessie Ray!" Ruby screamed, sprinting for the paddock. Evelyn yanked a hose from the side of the house, fumbling to turn it on. The stream was pitiful against the roaring blaze, but she aimed it anyway, sweat and smoke stinging her eyes. The barn roof groaned, timbers popping as the heat grew. Ruby burst into the barn, her only thought for Jessie Ray. The colt was frantic, rearing and kicking in his stall, nostrils flaring with terror. Flames crept along the rafters overhead. "Easy, boy! I'm here!" Ruby cried, flinging open the stall gate. Jessie Ray hesitated, fear freezing him. Ruby rushed forward, grabbing his halter, yanking him toward the door. For a terrifying moment, he resisted. Then, as the roof began to collapse behind them, Jessie Ray bolted, nearly dragging Ruby off her feet as they fled into the smoky night. Evelyn waved them on, coughing, her voice hoarse. "To the river, Ruby! Get to the river!" They ran, Jessie Ray stumbling but alive, down to the old creek at the property's edge. The water was low, but the air was cooler there, away from the fire's wrath. Evelyn joined them, sagging to her knees, her arms around Ruby, both shaking, the smell of burning hay thick in their clothes. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sound both hopeful and too late. By the time the volunteer fire crew arrived, the barn was gone. Only blackened beams and glowing embers left behind. A small crowd gathered, drawn by the lights. Neighbors, deputies, and of course, Wade, who stood at the edge of the property, face stony and unreadable. Deputy Harris approached, hands on his hips. Any idea how it started? Evelyn's glare was cold enough to cut glass. Wasn't no accident, if that's what you're asking. Ruby, dirty and still shaking, pointed at the fence where the lock had been cut clean through. "We know who did it." The deputy's jaw tightened, but he only scribbled in his notebook, muttering something about evidence and investigation. Ruby could see the doubt in his eyes. The Montgomery name carried a lot of weight in Jasper Creek, and everyone knew it. The next day dawned gray and bitter. The barn was lost, along with feed, tools, and most of their hay for winter. Neighbors dropped by, some with genuine sympathy, others just to gawk. Mrs. Zarku Carter from the next farm brought a pie and awkward condolences. Old Mr. Grady stood at the property line, hands stuffed in his pockets, not quite brave enough to step closer. Evelyn wanted to break down, to let the tears come. But Ruby's resolve was like steel. "We're not done. Not by a long shot." They worked all day to salvage what they could, cleaning up debris, checking on Jessie Ray, who paced nervously but seemed otherwise unharmed. Ruby started a list of what they'd lost, determined to find a way through. Every bruise, every blister only sharpened her resolve. That night, as darkness settled and the farm sat silent but for the chirp of crickets, Evelyn sat beside Ruby on the porch, a blanket draped over their shoulders. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn let her guard slip, her voice trembling. "I can't do this alone, Ruby. Not anymore." Ruby squeezed her grandmother's hand. "You're not alone. We're a team, and no matter what Wade throws at us, we'll rebuild. For Jessie Ray. For us. Evelyn wiped her eyes, a small, fierce smile breaking through. All right then, let's show him what Carters are made of. In the darkness, Jessie Ray nickered softly from his pen, as if echoing their vow. The Carter women sat shoulder to shoulder, battered but unbroken, staring into the night. The fire had taken much, but it hadn't touched their spirit. In the glow of smoldering embers, a new kind of determination took root. They would not yield. Not now. Not ever. Summer faded into crisp autumn, bringing a change to the Carter farm. The scars of the fire still lingered in blackened earth and the missing barn, but the land was greening again, and the air was filled with the scent of hay, earth, and hope. Jessie Ray grew stronger each day, his coat thick and glossy. The limp in his step nearly vanished. The town's whispers grew quieter, but the tension was far from over. One morning, a sharp knock shattered the peace. Ruby opened the door to find a stranger on the porch, a man in a pressed suit, briefcase in hand, eyes cool and unreadable. Good morning. I'm Lawrence Keene, attorney for Mr. Wade Montgomery. Is Mrs. Carter at home? Evelyn stood behind Ruby, arms folded, voice steely. I'm Mrs. Carter. What's your business? The man handed her a thick envelope. Mr. Montgomery is filing suit for ownership of the colt you purchased. He claims the auction paperwork was mishandled and that Jessie Ray, due to his Claymore bloodline, rightfully belongs to the Montgomery estate. You'll be expected in court in 2 weeks. Ruby's jaw dropped. That's ridiculous. She bought him fair and square. The attorney didn't flinch. I suggest you hire representation. Good day. He walked away, leaving the women frozen in the doorway. Evelyn turned the envelope over in her hands, the weight of it suddenly immense. That night, the kitchen filled with voices, neighbors, friends, people who'd once kept their distance now offering advice, outrage, or just plain curiosity. Some said to fight, others to settle. A few even whispered that maybe Evelyn should have taken Wade's money when she had the chance. But Evelyn was unmoved. He thinks he can buy anything. Well, not this. Ruby spent sleepless nights researching, poring over auction records, pedigree laws, and local gossip. She tracked down Dr. Nash, the vet who'd first treated Jessie Ray, and he agreed to testify to the colt's condition when Evelyn bought him. Evelyn called her old friend Martha, who'd worked at the auction house for 30 years and knew every backroom deal in Jasper Creek. The day of the hearing arrived gray and cold. Evelyn dressed in her Sunday best, shoulders set, hair pulled back. Ruby wore a blazer borrowed from a friend, her nerves buzzing. They entered the small county courthouse and found Wade already there, flanked by his attorney and a small army of supporters, ranch hands in starched shirts, local politicians, even the sheriff. The town seemed to have come to watch, eager for a show. The judge was a woman named Rosalie Green, tough, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for fairness. She called the room to order, her gavel echoing like thunder. The hearing began with Wade's lawyer, Keene, laying out their claim. That Jessie Ray had been mistakenly auctioned, that the paperwork was unclear, and that, given the value of the Claymore bloodline, justice demanded the horse be returned to its rightful owner. He spoke with the oily smoothness of a man used to getting his way. Evelyn's lawyer, a gray-haired woman named Linda McCarty, stood, voice clear and strong. Your Honor, Mrs. Carter purchased the colt in good faith. She paid what was asked, cared for him when no one else would, and there is no evidence of fraud or error. The parade of witnesses began. Wade's ranch manager testified about the value of Claymore horses, speaking of championships, breeding fees, and tradition. The auction house manager admitted the paperwork was rushed, but insisted the sale was final. Ruby's turn came. She stood, hands shaking, and looked at the judge. Your Honor, when my grandmother bought Jesse Ray, he was broken, sick, near death, and left behind by everyone, including Mr. Montgomery. She didn't see a dollar sign. She saw a life worth saving. Keene pressed her, sneering. Isn't it true you only discovered the colt's value after the fact? That you hid his bloodline? Ruby met his gaze. We didn't hide anything. We took care of him because that's what you do for family. Money didn't matter. Dr. Nash took the stand next. He described the colt's condition, the slim odds of survival, and Evelyn's dedication. Without her, that horse wouldn't be here today. That's a fact. Finally, Evelyn herself spoke. Her voice unwavering. I'm an old woman, Your Honor. I don't have much, but I have my word. I gave Jesse Ray a home, not because I wanted anything from him, but because he needed someone. Sometimes what's right isn't about contracts or money. It's about doing the hard thing when no one else will. The courtroom was silent. Even Wade looked away, jaw tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. The judge leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. I will review the evidence and announce my decision tomorrow. Until then, Jesse Ray will remain with Mrs. Carter. Outside, the courthouse steps buzzed with debate. Some called Evelyn a hero, others a fool. Wade's supporters grumbled, their faces dark with frustration. But Evelyn and Ruby stood together, Jesse Ray's fate still uncertain, but their heads held high. That night was long and sleepless. Ruby sat by the window, watching the wind sweep across the fields. Evelyn prayed in her room, hands clasped, the weight of the fight heavy on her shoulders. But as dawn broke, golden and bright, the women met in the kitchen, hearts bruised but unbowed. Whatever the judge decided, they knew they had already won something precious, each other, and the knowledge that they'd stood up for what was right. Whatever happens, Grandma, Ruby said quietly, I'm proud to be a Carter. Evelyn smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. Me too, honey. Me too. The sun rose, the world holding its breath for the verdict to come. Sunrise painted the sky in streaks of gold and scarlet, but Evelyn and Ruby felt only the cold weight of waiting. The kitchen was silent except for the soft clink of spoons in coffee mugs, the distant sound of Jesse Ray pawing in his paddock. Each minute stretched painfully as the morning wore on. Evelyn's hands trembled when she reached for the radio, turning the dial low, not listening for music but simply needing something, anything, to break the tension. By 9, the phone rang. Ruby snatched it up, holding her breath. Yes, this is Ruby Carter. Thank you, we'll be there. She hung up, her face pale but determined. The judge is ready, Grandma. We have to go. They dressed in silence. Evelyn straightened her best dress, hands smoothing the faded fabric over her hips, her hair pulled into a tight bun. Ruby wore the blazer again, this time without nerves, her eyes fierce. They climbed into the old pickup and drove toward town, the fields sliding past, autumn leaves swirling in their wake. The courthouse was already crowded, the air buzzing with rumor. Townsfolk pressed close, a few nodding encouragement, others whispering behind their hands. Wade Montgomery waited at the top of the steps, arms crossed, his lawyer beside him, a thin smile plastered on his face. Evelyn met his eyes, steady as stone. Inside, Judge Rosalie Green entered, her presence quiet but commanding. She took her seat, peering over her glasses at the packed room. After careful review of the facts and the testimony provided, she began, "This court finds that the sale of the colt known as Jessie Ray was legal and binding. Mrs. Evelyn Carter is recognized as his rightful owner." A collective gasp swept the room. Wade's face turned red, then white, his jaw clenching as if he wanted to spit nails. His attorney leaned in, whispering furiously. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, the court is troubled by evidence of intimidation and sabotage brought against Mrs. Carter and her property. Law enforcement will investigate these matters separately. The law does not condone bullying, not in Jasper Creek or anywhere else. Ruby squeezed Evelyn's hand, her shoulders shaking with relief and joy. Around them, the crowd erupted, some in applause, others grumbling in disbelief. Friends hurried to hug them, while Wade's supporters melted away, avoiding eye contact. Wade pushed past them on his way out, glaring at Evelyn. "This isn't over, old woman." Evelyn held her ground. "For you, maybe. For us, it's just begun." Outside, the sun shone bright, the town square alive with celebration. Neighbors who doubted Evelyn now came forward, many apologizing for their silence or skepticism. The mayor shook her hand, promising support. Even old Mr. Grady, gruff and awkward, pressed a sack of oats into Ruby's hands, mumbling, "I should have spoken up sooner. You did us all proud." Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling. It wasn't the money, or even the legal victory, that meant the most. It was the sense of community restored, the way people rallied around her and Ruby, the way they'd found their way back to each other through hardship. Back at the farm, Jessie Ray greeted them with a joyous whinny, galloping across the field, his silver coat flashing in the autumn light. Ruby leaned over the fence, laughing as the colt nuzzled her shoulder, nipping at her hair in playful affection. Evelyn watched, a tear slipping down her cheek, one of joy, not sorrow. "He knows he's home now," Evelyn whispered. That evening, the farm buzzed with visitors, friends bearing casseroles, neighbors stopping by to help rebuild the barn, even children from town bringing handmade cards and apples for Jessie Ray. Laughter and music filled the air. Someone brought a battered old radio, and Evelyn dusted off her guitar, strumming an old country song as the sun dipped behind the trees. Ruby caught her grandmother's eye across the firelight. "You did it, Grandma. You saved him. You saved all of us." Evelyn shook her head. "I didn't do it alone. None of us ever do." She watched Jessie Ray gallop, healed and free, across the field where months ago he'd limped and suffered. The sight of him, strong, unbroken, and utterly alive, filled her with a hope she hadn't dared feel in years. As night fell, Evelyn stood on the porch, the farm peaceful at last. Ruby joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Think folks will finally leave us alone now?" Ruby asked, a teasing smile on her lips. Evelyn chuckled, leaning into her granddaughter. "Maybe for a little while, but even if they don't, we'll handle it. Like always." Ruby gazed out over the fields, her voice soft. "He's not just a horse, you know. He's a miracle." Evelyn nodded, the truth of it ringing deep inside her. Sometimes, the hardest fights are the ones worth winning, and the smallest lives change us the most. Down in the paddock, Jessie Ray tossed his head, mane rippling in the moonlight, a living symbol of second chances. Inside the house, a framed photograph of Tom Carter watched over them, his smile gentle and proud. Evelyn touched the frame, her voice a whisper meant only for him. We did it, Tom. We're still standing. Outside, the Carter farm glowed with life and laughter. The pain of the past months washed away by forgiveness, perseverance, and the promise of brighter days. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn let herself believe in miracles, and knew deep in her bones that home was not a place, but the love you fought to protect. The Carter farmhouse was full that Sunday evening, though not with crowds or strangers. Instead, the kitchen table was surrounded by faces both old and new, folks who had shown up through thick and thin. Mrs. Sean Carter from down the road, who once kept her distance, now brought over fresh-baked bread and joined Ruby at the stove. Old Mr. Grady, quiet and thoughtful, helped mend a broken chair in the corner. Even Pastor Allen arrived after the evening service, leaving his collar at home and rolling up his sleeves to chop wood for the fire. Laughter and gentle conversation floated through the house, weaving a tapestry of belonging and gratitude. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her weathered hands folded before her, a smile softening her stern features. She listened as stories tumbled out, of the trial, of old days, of the little miracles found in every ordinary hour. Jesse Ray, always the center of attention, stuck his nose through the open window, demanding an apple, sending the group into a chorus of laughter. He knows he's the reason we're all here, Ruby joked, tossing him a slice. Evelyn caught her granddaughter's gaze and nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. After all the storms, the fire, the courtroom, and the heartache, here they were, whole, and somehow more than they'd been before. When the meal finished and plates were cleared, the talk turned quieter. Pastor Allen, his voice gentle, looked around the table. If I may, I'd like to ask, what's the biggest lesson you've carried from all this? For a moment, silence reigned. Then Mrs. Carter spoke up. I guess I learned not to judge so quick. Sometimes folks fight battles you can't see. Mr. Grady nodded, looking at his hands. I spent too long thinking I'd seen it all. Turns out, we all got something to learn from each other, no matter how old we get. Ruby looked down, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. I thought leaving this place would make me stronger, more independent. But coming back, fighting for Jesse Ray, for Grandma, it taught me the strongest thing you can do is show up for the people who need you, even when it's hard. Maybe especially then. The table fell quiet, the truth of her words settling deep. Evelyn reached over and squeezed Ruby's hand. Family isn't just blood, Evelyn said softly. It's love, forgiveness, standing together when it'd be easier to run. She looked around at the faces illuminated by warm lamplight, her eyes shining. You know, when Tom died, I thought I was finished. Folks turned away. Some pitied me, others forgot I was here at all. But Jesse Ray, he gave me a reason to try again, to fight for something bigger than myself. And you all? You reminded me that hope doesn't come from grand gestures, but from everyday courage. Pastor Allen nodded, eyes glinting. That's what makes a family. A willingness to keep trying, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Redemption is for everyone. Animals, people, even a stubborn old farm like this. The group chuckled, but the mood was tender. Ruby spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. Jesse Ray showed me forgiveness. When we found him, he had every reason to give up, to mistrust everyone. But he let us in. He trusted us. It made me realize, if a broken colt can learn to trust, maybe I can too. Evelyn smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. The world will always be full of folks who want to tear you down, who say you're not enough, that your best isn't worth a thing. But sometimes, you gotta shut out those voices and listen to the ones that matter, the ones that believe in second chances. The fire crackled, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the promise of another season. Jesse Ray, content and safe, lay in his paddock, the stars above him bright and sure. Evelyn stood and poured more tea, her steps slow but steady. Cynicism's easy, but it's courage that changes things, she continued. It takes guts to hope, to love, to forgive. That's what I want to pass on. Not just land or memories, but the belief that even when the world laughs in your face, you keep going. Mr. Grady raised his cup. To courage and to second chances. Everyone echoed the toast, the words ringing out in the cozy kitchen, binding them together with something stronger than blood. As the evening wound down, folks lingered on the porch, swapping stories, watching Jesse Ray graze under the moonlight. Ruby leaned against the railing, her thoughts drifting to the future. Evelyn joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You did good, kiddo. I'm proud of you. Ruby laughed, wiping her eyes. We did it together, Grandma, all of us. The farm felt lighter now, as if the land itself had exhaled. The bitterness of loss and hardship had given way to gratitude, forgiveness, and a deep-rooted sense of belonging. The lessons of the past months would not be forgotten. They'd become the very soil in which hope grew. Inside, a family portrait hung on the wall. Evelyn, Tom, a much younger Ruby. Beside it, a new photo, Jesse Ray, head high, flanked by two Carter women, each with eyes shining and smiles unguarded. As the stars wheeled overhead and the lights in the farmhouse glowed, Evelyn whispered a prayer of thanks for redemption, for family, for the miracle of a battered colt who'd brought them all home. Dawn broke clear and sweet over the Carter farm, spilling soft gold across fields brushed with morning dew. It was the kind of sunrise that made the world feel brand new, where even scars from old fires seemed touched by forgiveness and the promise of something better. Evelyn Carter stood at her porch railing, a mug of coffee warming her hands, her gaze sweeping the familiar land. She watched Jesse Ray gallop, strong and graceful, his silver coat flashing in the gentle light as he kicked up his heels and spun in the crisp air. Ruby joined her, arms folded, eyes crinkling with sleep and contentment. Together they stood in silence, listening to the wind whisper through the pecan trees, the soft nicker of horses, the distant call of a rooster greeting the new day. He looks happy, Ruby said softly. He is, Evelyn replied, her voice full of pride. And so am I. The farm was alive again. The barn, rebuilt by friends and neighbors, gleamed with fresh paint. The fences were straight, the garden thriving. But the greatest change wasn't in the land. It was in the people. Old wounds had begun to heal. Conversations at the feed store were friendlier, smiles more genuine. Even those who'd once doubted the Carters now greeted them with respect. Jesse Ray had become more than a miracle horse. He was a symbol of hope, of second chances, of what could happen when folks came together for something bigger than themselves. Kids from the county came by after school, bringing carrots and apples, brushing his mane and listening to Ruby's stories. Teachers asked Evelyn to speak at the elementary school about courage and kindness. Folks stopped by just to pat Jesse Ray's neck, as if by touching him, they could claim a little of that magic for themselves. One Saturday, the town hosted a fall festival in the square, and Ruby led Jesse Ray through the parade, the colt's head held high, his mane braided with red ribbons. As they passed the courthouse, where just weeks before their future had hung in the balance, the crowd erupted in applause. Evelyn, watching from the sidelines, wiped a tear from her eye, gratitude swelling in her chest. Afterward, back at the farm, Evelyn sat with Ruby on the porch, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut hay. Ruby pulled her legs up under her gaze serious. "Grandma, do you ever wonder why all this happened? The pain, the fight, the loss? Then this?" Evelyn considered. She thought of Tom, of years when hope felt thin, of the laughter and the loneliness and every struggle that had nearly broken her. Sometimes life gives us the broken and the battered to remind us of our own strength, Evelyn said. It's not about what you lose. It's about what you give, how you get back up, and who stands with you when the world says you're done. Ruby nodded, her eyes shining. I used to think home was just a place, but it's not. It's the people who believe in you, even when you can't believe in yourself. Evelyn smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Ruby's cheek. That's the legacy I want to leave, she said. Not land or money, but love, courage, the will to try again, no matter how many times you fall. As the days shortened and the nights grew cool, Evelyn made a habit of walking the fields at dusk. She'd watch Jesse Ray grazing peacefully, sometimes racing the wind with a few of the neighbor kids cheering him on. Each evening, she'd pause by the old oak tree, touch its rough bark, and whisper a word of thanks for forgiveness, for healing, for every second chance she'd ever received or given. Sometimes she'd sit on the porch in the dark, her guitar on her lap, picking out a slow, sweet tune. Ruby would join her, humming, their voices mingling with the soft chorus of crickets and the far-off howl of a coyote. The farm became a gathering place, a safe harbor for anyone feeling lost, anyone needing kindness. A single mom from town started bringing her little boy over on weekends, teaching him how to brush Jesse Ray, how to be gentle. A retired rancher who'd lost everything in the drought stopped by to share a story and a cup of coffee, finding in Evelyn's stubborn hope a reflection of his own. Through it all, Evelyn learned that true wealth wasn't measured in acres or dollars, but in the lives she touched, the neighbor she helped, the granddaughter she welcomed home, the frightened animal she refused to give up on. The world, she realized, was full of broken things, but also full of hearts willing to mend them. One afternoon, after the chores were done and the sun slipped low, Ruby sat beside her grandmother, both content and quiet. They watched Jesse Ray stand silhouetted against the fading light, mane tossing, strong and free. "Do you think we'll ever forget this, Grandma?" Ruby asked. "Never," Evelyn replied. "Because every time you forgive, every time you reach out, you plant a seed. Maybe it takes years to grow. Maybe someone else waters it. But one day, someone stands in the shade of what you planted, and they know hope." Ruby smiled, leaning her head on Evelyn's shoulder. "You're the bravest person I know." Evelyn laughed, a warm, rich sound. "I just did what needed doing. That's all any of us can do." Night settled softly over the Carter farm. Lights glowed in the windows. Laughter drifted from the porch. Jesse Ray grazed, unafraid, in a pasture that had seen fire and storm, defeat and victory, and still endured. As Evelyn played her old guitar, Ruby's voice joined hers, weaving harmony and memory into the gentle dark. The song was simple, about love, about hope, about believing when it would be easier to give up. And as the music faded, Evelyn looked out at her family, her friends, and the miracle horse who had changed everything. She knew, without a doubt, that compassion, perseverance, and forgiveness were the real gifts. Gifts she'd give again and again, for as long as there was breath in her body. For in the end, the weakest and most broken, be they horse or human, could bring out the very best in everyone, uniting a community, healing old wounds, and lighting the way forward. The story of Evelyn, Ruby, and Jessie Ray would be told for generations, not because of the hardship or the fight, but because they chose kindness, chose to believe, and in doing so, changed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them. And that, Evelyn knew as she watched the dawn break over the land she loved, was the truest legacy of all.